Hey everybody, my name's Ryan, and here at eTrailer we install, test fit, and review a lot of different parts. That way we could try to answer any questions those of you might have. And that's exactly what we're doing here today on our 2013 Toyota Highlander. We're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the universal installation kit for trailer brake controllers. So with these Highlanders being really capable SUVs, people tend to use them to do a little bit of everything, which does include towing relatively large trailers that have brakes. So you're going to need a brake controller to slow those trailers down. And in order to use a brake controller with your Highlander, this kit here is going to be one of the things that you're going to need to make that happen. It's going to provide that brake controller with the necessary inputs and outputs for it to work properly. As kind of a bonus too, what I like is you're going to get the 7-way connector. So you're going to be able to hook up to those trailers that have these type of connectors, whether they have brakes or not. Majority of the time they will, but that's there for you to use. And you're still also going to have a 4-way flat connector. So you're still going to be able to maintain that, which is nice. You're not going to have to worry about getting some type of adapter plug that converts your 7-way into a 4-way and have to worry about all that. You'll still be able to have your 4-way right here on your bracket. So the kit is going to come with pretty much everything that you're going to need. There may be a few bits and pieces here and there that you'll have to pick up separately, just depending on your exact vehicle. You know, you may need a different type of bracket that allows you to connect this to the hitch. Or like in our case, I use some wire loom here just to kind of clean up our install look. So just small things like that. But with that being said, everything in the kit is actually pretty nice. All the wiring is very thick and high quality. It's going to come with some breakers. That way, whenever you connect it to your battery, you know they're going to be circuit protected. And everything is just pretty straightforward. It's going to make hooking up a brake controller much easier on you. Now, as far as the installation goes, it's really not all that complicated, but it is time consuming just having to route all the wires and everything else. But as long as you stay focused, you should have no problem getting it done at home. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and put it on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the back of our Highlander, and first thing that we're going to need to do is mount up our connector plug. Now the kit does come with this bracket here that I put onto our hitch, and our hitch actually had a mounting point for it. Just bolts right on. If your hitch doesn't have a mounting point, what you need to do is pick up a no drill bracket that you can connect to the hitch. That way you can connect this to the no drill bracket. You can find that at eTrailer here. With that being said, we're just going to feed all the wires through, line up our 7-way, and what we're going to do to secure it in each one of the holes is take one of these screws and push it through, and then on the back side you're going to take a flat washer, a split lock washer, and a nut. I'd snug it down. I'm going to use that same hardware combination for our 3 remaining openings here. So once we have all the hardware in place and hand tight, I'm going to come back with a wrench and a screwdriver and just snug them all down. So this connector plug here is going to have 2 4-way flat connectors. One is just going to get mounted to our bracket. It just pushes in there like this. The other one we're going to have to connect to our existing 4-way flat wiring that's already on our Toyota. Now, our customer already had a kit installed a year or 2 ago. If you need a 4-way connector for your Highlander, we have multiple kits right here at eTrailer, so you will need this to get this job done. But with that being said, these are just going to plug right into each other. What I'm going to do is take some dielectric grease and coat the terminals. Gives them a little bit of extra protection. So those will just plug right in. And then it's not a horrible idea either to come back with some electrical tape and just tape everything up real good. That way it'll help keep out any contaminants. So here's what that connector looks like once I taped it up, and I also ran a zip tie around the two. That way they can accidentally become disconnected. So with that done, now we can focus on the white wire with the pre-attached ring terminal. This is going to need to get grounded to the body of our vehicle, and I'm going to use the included self-tapping screw to do that. What I'm going to do is move this wire out of the way first. But I'm going to go right up here. Now what we can do is get our other wires ready. So you're going to have a blue wire, a black wire, and a yellow wire. The yellow wire we're not going to be using. That's for your reverse light circuit, and you would typically only hook that up if you had a marine application like a boat trailer with surge brakes. In our case we don't, so I just taped it up out of the way. That being said though, the kit is going to come with these pre-attached butt connectors. These will work just fine, but what I like to do is switch them out for a heat shrink type butt connector. It just seals up the ends and gives us a little more protection. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch those out. I'm just going to clip them off. Strip back the insulation here. On the black and the blue wire. And you can find these heat shrink butt connectors here at eTrailer if you want to make the switch as well. But the way these are going to work is it's going to slide over the bearing to the wire. And then you can crimp them down. Now what we can do is grab our bundle of wiring and get those ready to hook up to the other ends of our butt connectors. And what you're going to need to do is there is a gray cover on there. You can just cut a few inches of that off. That'll expose two wires up beneath it, a white one and a black one. You're going to strip the insulation back on each end, and these are going to get connected to our butt connectors here. So the black wire coming from our 7-way is going to get connected to the black wire in our bundle of wire. It just plugs in and crimps down. And if we grab the blue wire from our 7-way, that's going to get connected to the white wire from our big bundle wire there. So get that crimped. Then I'll come back with my heat source and seal up the ends. So now what I went ahead and did was route our bundle of wiring towards the front of our vehicle into the engine compartment. Here's where it starts. Here's where we made our connections with the butt connectors. I did, however, just put some electrical tape around them too to help keep them protected. With that being said, I route it towards the front. You want to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts. Went up and over our subframe here. It kind of runs up through there. You want to secure it along the way using some of the zip ties. You can see where the wiring drops down there. And I just followed this e-brake cable here, and where it comes out through here. Now this panel, you don't have to take this off. It does make it a lot easier, or lower it at least. There's a couple 10mm nuts kind of along the edge there. You can pull them out and kind of tuck this down. But that being said, here's our wire going across the brace here. Right up through here. Right along through there. And you can see it where it goes up into the engine compartment. Now the way I got it up there is I used a pull wire. So I had a piece of tubing. You can also use a coat hanger, something like that. But you drop it down from the top to down here to the bottom. You tape your wire to it, and then you're able to pull it right up into position. Now here in the engine compartment, as you can see, this is where our wiring comes up. And what I'm going to do is remove the rest of our gray sheathing. That way we just have two wires to work with. So if you're wondering how to do this, if you kind of feel it, you can feel the two wires and you can kind of feel a void there in the center. You can carefully take a razor and just very carefully kind of cut through that first layer. You can feel it kind of glide through pretty easily. If it starts getting hung up, I suggest kind of stopping and kind of finding that center again. But I'm just going to do this to separate the rest of the sheath from our wiring up here. With the sheathing off of our wires, now we can take our breakers and mount these up. You're going to want to use the 40 amp breaker and the 20 amp breaker. So I'm just going to mount these probably right here along this part of the firewall. And the way I'm going to do that is by using the provided self-tapping screws. And one on each end of it. And then we'll do the same thing for our 20 amp breaker. I'll just go ahead and more or less put it pretty much right next to it. So now what I went ahead and did was cut our black wire to length and crimped on a ring terminal. Just how we did the butt connectors earlier. You strip back the insulation and crimp it on. So you want to use a small ring terminal, and this is going to get connected to the silver post on our 40 amp breaker. So you can remove that nut, slide that over, go ahead and run that nut back down. Just going to snug it up using a 3/8 socket here. And then with the black wire that you had extra that you trimmed off, what we're going to do is kind of make a jumper almost. So this is probably about 2 foot long. One end I put a small ring terminal. The other end I put one of the large ring terminals. And the small end is going to go over the 40 amp breaker here. We're going to put that over the gold post. I'll take the nut, run that back down as well. And the other end of it, we're eventually going to hook up to the positive battery terminal. We're not going to do that just yet though. Now as far as our 20 amp breaker goes, we're going to need another short jumper wire. Same setup as the other one, large ring terminal, small ring terminal. Over the gold post on this 20 amp breaker, we're going to put small ring terminal. I'm going to tighten that nut down as well. And then with the remaining wire that you have left over, one end we don't have anything connected to. The other end, however, we have one small ring terminal. And this wire will eventually run inside of our vehicle and get hooked up to the brake controller. The one that we just put on this gold post, that's going to run to the battery as well. So we'll get this tightened down. And start working on routing our wires. Now what we need to do is come over here to the driver's side, inside of our vehicle here, And underneath the dash, we need to create an opening. That way we can route some of our wires from the engine compartment inside of the vehicle. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a factory area or a grommet, if you will, that we can just simply push our wires through. So I did have to drill a small hole to allow us to get those wires inside here. Now, when you're doing this, you want to be extremely careful. We don't have a ton of space under here, and there's a lot of important components on the other side against the firewall, particularly our brake booster and some wiring, things like that. So you want to double, if not triple check where you think you need to drill. Now, fortunately, I found a spot under here that's relatively open and gives us the ability to drill that hole without having to worry about hitting those components. So underneath the dash here, this is where the hole is, and I simply just drilled through the firewall, and then I used a snap bushing to pop into place. That way we don't have to worry about running our wires through a metal surface, which could potentially damage them. So definitely recommend picking up one of these snap bushings. That way there's a soft surface for the wires to run through, and you can find that right here at eTrailer. So now what I've done is just used a pull wire, pushed it through that hole that we drilled into the engine compartment, and on the other side I taped on our white wire and that black wire that we didn't have anything attached to the other end there. So with those taped on, we can carefully pull this pull wire and feed our wiring into the engine compartment here. Now what I went ahead and did was just cut our wires to length. I like to have a little bit extra, that way it's a lot easier to work with. And then I just stripped back the insulation and crimped on the included buck connectors here. At this point, you can hook up to your brake controller plug. The black wire, that's going to be the power for the brake controller itself, and the white wire is going to be your trailer brake output. So typically, the majority of brake controllers, this will go to the blue wire on that brake controller plug, but double check with your particular brake controller instructions to make sure that is indeed correct. So once you have these hooked up, then we can go back underneath the hood and connect those two ring terminals to the positive battery post. Lift up the cap, and we have a couple of choices on where we can hook up these two wires. I usually prefer to use this stud here. So you can use 12 millimeter and pull this nut off. However, I tried, and it is extremely tight. So I really don't want to risk breaking our battery terminal. So instead, we're going to use this post here. So what I'm going to do is remove this nut with a 10 millimeter. Carefully pull it off. Then our ring terminals are simply just going to slide right over it. Hold them in place and reinstall our nut there. Now, it never is a bad idea just to test everything out. So we have our tester box plugged into our new 7-way, and we're going to check all of our signals, first being our left turn, our right turn, our running lights. Then we can hit our brake lights. In the top right corner there, you can see that we have our auxiliary power. And then we can go ahead and hit our manual override to see that we have a brake output signal. And since the wiring kit also has the 4-pole included, we'll go ahead and check that as well just to be sure. So we have our left turn, our right turn, our brakes, and our running lights. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the universal installation kit for trailer brake controllers on our 2013 Toyota Highlander.